Hi guys, welcome back to AFTV and the Tactical Insight Show. I'm here with Graham. How are you, Graham?
Very well, mate. Nice to see you again.
Lovely to see you too. Honestly, I love spending time with you, but all we seem to be doing is talking about Arsenal, well, I want to say negatively. I mean, it's hard to find any positives. Before we go into it, how are you? You were at the game yesterday.
I was at the game yesterday. That was my first time back in the stadium for 533 days. And that's as good as it got yesterday.
Yeah.
I did a fan cam on AFTV yesterday, which amazingly, as big up the guy who pointed it out to me, lasted for 5 minutes 33 seconds.
No way! Oh, bloody hell. There you go. That's something. That's my favourite stat of the day, to be honest.
But everything was going great yesterday till we kicked off.
Yeah, of course. Well, look, we've got to talk about it, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all the support over the last couple of shows we've done. We're really enjoying doing this every week. Let's get straight into the game. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the goals. We're going to analyse them. We're going to break them down. We're going to talk about where Arteta was tactically naive. But we pride ourselves on giving balance and context in our shows. We always want to look at the bigger picture, everything going on. Arteta's going to take a lot of blame for this result and performance, and rightly so. But there were other factors. We're going to go into them. Just before we do, let's have a little look at some of the match stats, just to remind ourselves, kind of, at a base level, what we went through yesterday.
I mean, pre-game, Arteta talked about harnessing the energy of the crowd, which, to be fair, the crowd were really up for the game yesterday. The way we started, it was great to be back in a stadium yesterday with the fans. But those stats are quite damning, aren't they? It just showed that it really was men against boys yesterday. Chelsea are the European champions for a reason. They totally dominated the game. The golfing class was evident from the start. They had 2/3 of the possession, outshot us 22-6 in our own stadium. They had more shots on target. Their pass completion was almost double, and their expected goals was massively higher than ours, James.
Yeah, and you know what? The stats don't lie. Unlike the Brentford game, where it was us who had 22 shots, but it was very different. You know what? Lukaku and Chelsea looked like scoring every time they came towards our goal, whereas we looked like we were just sort of hopeful against Brentford. So that's the interesting thing about stats. We're going to go into some context around this game, because we did go into it missing 6 really key players, and we sort of had a little look at the numbers, which we're bringing up here. 6 key players. Obviously got Gabriel out injured, Ben White who's recovering from COVID, Partey with an ankle injury, Odegaard whose visa didn't come on time, Alex Lacazette who's also recovering from COVID, and Aubameyang did make an appearance off the bench but wasn't fit enough to start. How important is it when you're missing, what's that? I mean, you count it in your head, 200 something?
270 million.
Right, £270 million worth of talent. How important is that?
Well, it's very important. I think the thing is, one thing I will say is that it's hard enough beating Chelsea when you put full strength side out, because they are a very good side. They're probably going to contest the title this year in Man City. But to lose, in context for Arteta, to lose the spine of his team, that is his spine.
Yeah.
That's his first choice centre-halves, Gabriel and White. White going down to COVID on the weekend of the game. And we have to say, first of all, that last week we did get it wrong. Hold my hands up. We did think there was something going on between Lacazette, Aubameyang and Arteta. There was a COVID outbreak. Why it took so long to actually get across and announce that, only Arsenal know, but that's exactly what's going on. But he's without his first choice centre-halves, his key physical enforcer in midfield, his DM Partey. Odegaard, obviously, he's only just come, wasn't ready. And then his 2 main strikers, 500k of talent up front. So when you're without that, there are extenuating circumstances for him, and he had to find a way really to compete with Chelsea and set the team up to give us the best chance to win with those absentees. But to lose those players, if you took key players out of any top lineup, it would have an effect.
Yeah, I completely agree. And these were players that going into the season, all right, we kind of knew Gabriel and Partey might not be available. Odegaard, we hadn't signed yet, but we kind of felt that was happening. It's so disappointing. As you said, that key word, spine. It's not like we've lost a left winger here, a right back there or whatever. These are really key players in really key positions. So I did feel from there. We're going to apply a little bit more context to this before inevitably we are going to have to go in on what he got wrong tactically. And ultimately, the players that were out there were good enough to do more. But a word on Chelsea. They're our rivals, they're our London rivals. I hate it. I hate that they're European champions. But we've got to talk about how good they are as well. What I would say, just before we go into it, what I would say is that I think we've got a habit of looking at Chelsea as a team that haven't won the title for a few years, have been up and down, really, with managers. And so, because they've come to the Emirates, we've beaten them a few times, we've put 3 past them a few times, we went to the Bridge and won, we beat them in the FA Cup final. Maybe we had this false sense of security that, you know what, if we turn up, we can beat them. But they're a much, much better team than they were in December, aren't they?
They are. The last time they turned up at the Emirates was when Lampard was manager, Arteta was manager. Both managers were struggling in the league.
Yep.
Both were under pressure. They took the decision to really sack a club legend in Lampard pretty soon after that 3-1 defeat. That, in a way, almost like it did 3 or 4 years ago when Conte was manager of Chelsea and they came to the Emirates. Wish it was Highbury. Yeah. Came to the Emirates, got beat 3-0. Conte went to the back 3 and they won the league that year. That was a pivotal moment last year. They brought in Thomas Tuchel, sacked Lampard, a club legend, a great player, and this is where they are under Tuchel. And you can't hide these facts, can you? They rank first for goals conceded, first for clean sheets. That's goals conceded last year 13, clean sheets 12. They ranked first for shots on target 117, but were 15th for their overall conversion rate. So that's why they bought Lukaku, and Lukaku yesterday was a complete centre-forward performance. We have to say that why were we surprised yesterday that Arsenal didn't score against a team who are that good defensively when we are struggling to create and score goals? So it wasn't really, when you look at it, a surprise, but that's the opposition we had yesterday. Chelsea are a top side under Tuchel.
They really are, and they won the Champions League doing it. That's the thing with this blueprint, the 3-4-3. So we've applied our context. Arteta was up against it with the players missing, and even with I heard a lot of fans saying, yeah, but even if those players were available, we still would have lost. But that for me is even more kind of, what's the word? It just gives even more context to how good Chelsea are. Yeah. But also perhaps suggests that there's a lack of faith in the manager right now from the fan base. I think a lot of people have got to the point where they want to change, they're ready to move on. Let's look at this from a tactical perspective, where it went wrong, and we've got the starting 11s here, which we're just going to bring up. What were kind of the first things you felt went wrong from a tactical perspective?
Chelsea set up in their 3-4-3. We knew they were going to do that. We set up in a 4-2-3-1. If you set up in a 4-2-3-1, I think you have to respect the basic principles of 4-2-3-1. I don't think we did that. So what he did in the game was we pressed high against their back 3. So he asked these 3 of his players to press on their 3 centre-backs and Smith Rowe to pull onto one of their central midfield players, depending on whether they're playing out for the right or the left. So the problem with this is, what it does in effect is it means that you've got your wingers narrow. They literally come inside narrow, as you see there, to press. Now, if they don't win the ball, Chelsea are going to play round you in triangles and be able to progress the ball up the pitch. And our wide players then are not in a position to work back and support the fullbacks. Right. And that allowed Chelsea to get overloads in wide areas, and that was going on throughout the first half. And that was tactically, I think, an error that he made. He could have adjusted it, he didn't. He wanted us to press high. It was very brave to go that way. Chelsea are very good at playing around the press, the way they get Jorginho and Kovacic yesterday on the ball. And I don't think we did that well enough. I think that ultimately what I would have done personally, I would have sort of allowed them to have the ball at the back with their back 3, not engaged so high. I would have sat our 2 wide players on their wing backs and moved our central midfielders onto their central midfielders. And I'll talk about it later about going man for man, matching up 3-4-3. But when you commit to a 4-2-3-1, I think you have to go with the basic principles of a 4-2-3-1. I don't think he did that yesterday. Yeah,
interesting. Let's talk about the 3-4-3 because we're not Mr. Hindsight here. You were speaking about this a week ago. We sat here analysing Brentford, and I said to you, going into Chelsea, what would you do differently? And we had it in our minds that we were probably not going to have our strongest team. You said the back 3. Arteta didn't do it, but let's try talk people through what difference it might have made.
Yeah, I think what you do is, in my mind, if you play the back 3, you just match them up. So you literally you have wing back against wing back. So that means there's not the space for the overloads. You keep 3 back to boss their 2 forwards, and you play 3 up against their 3, and you match them up in central midfield. To get a hold in central midfield, you need to sort of match them up to sort of minimise the fact that they can play out and create overloads. So for me, I think the advantage of playing a back 3 is that you take care of their 2 forwards. You have your 2 centre mids competing against their 2 centre mids. You're literally matching them up, trying to win the duels. You've got your 2 wing backs against their two wing-backs, trying to stop them from creating the space out wide. It's a match-up again. And then basically you try to get your three forward players against their three centre half. So you're trying to match them up basically, and that is a very simple way to go in my opinion, because it's you know, it doesn't overcomplicate things. I think yesterday we overcomplicated it. The way that the system he played, I think, was complicated and led to problems we had.
Yeah, I completely agree. Listen, I think a lot of fans after were talking about the 3-4-3, saying when we saw Reece James constantly finding that space and Tierney constantly being dragged inside, it felt obvious, especially because one thing I've noticed under Mikel Arteta, when Aubameyang's played out on the left, he's constantly working back. You know, he's clearly been instructed, you've got to support, you've got to follow the fullback. Saka wasn't really doing that. So, as you said, he was asked to press really high up the pitch, Saka, almost on his Piliqueta, which is, all right, fine when maybe Chelsea have the ball in their third and you want to maybe force them into a mistake. But once they do beat that press and they're going at you, it's a lot to ask Bukayo Saka to press his Piliqueta and then cover Reece James. Both who are so good in their roles there.
Yeah, I think the only thing he could have done differently maybe Xhaka. I think we discussed what Xhaka's role was in this team. Yeah. I thought there was a massive gap between the two central midfielders yesterday, and that allowed Chelsea to play their entry pass into Lukaku very easily, which we're going to talk about. Xhaka, for me, part of the game was trying to support over that left-hand side, but a lot of the time he was also forward and out of position. Yeah. So that created the fact that Chelsea was sort of what they were doing. They were able to sort of like the way they were playing out in triangles, almost like diamond triangles, you could say, sort of like get the ball up the pitch, get the overloads out wide with James and Alonso, suck our players across the pitch, and then switch to play very cleverly and get an overload in an area on Tierney's side. And I felt sorry for Tierney. Tierney took a lot of criticism of Gary Neville yesterday for his positioning, but he had decisions to make on two occasions. He had Mount and James. Literally 2-on-1. So if he went to James, they would have played in Mount. If he went to Mount, which he did, they played in James. Yeah. And that's in fact what happened on the two goals. We're going to show the first goal here. Yeah,
here we are.
The key for me here is that the fact that the entry pass into Lukaku from Kovacic is very easy. The two centre mids are split. It plays into Lukaku. Mari gets too tight, I think.
So we've got it here.
Yeah, I think Mari, if he's got a choice of he's got to try and nick the ball first, or he's got to not get too tight, because the moment he gets too tight, Lukaku bullied him all game with his physicality. He couldn't cope with his physicality, so getting tight was always an issue. But Lukaku, classic centre forward play, the way he sort of like draws the man, holds the ball, plays it off, they switch it out wide, as you see from Kovacic, plays in James on the right hand side, who appears as the overload. Tierney's been sucked inside now to Mark Mount, which is the decision he had to make, which means that now that James is in space on the overload, not picked up, we haven't got our wide forward tracking back. Xhaka's out of position. They've got the overload. They worked it well. Now what Lukaku does really well in that play is he literally throws his physical strength, shakes Mari off straight away, and he's able to sort of like he's determined to get in there to finish that move. It's classic centre forward play. He will play it across now, and he'll just got to tap in. But it is a very well worked goal, but preventable.
Yeah, I agree, and it is this pass here, which we're just going to show one more time, that Kovacic into Lukaku here. Yeah. And the staggering thing is that if you're going to play a back four, that typically means that you want to keep the midfield quite packed because you're going to play a midfield three. Yeah. But we had Smith Rowe playing as a really classic 10. I thought Smith Rowe looked bright and tried to do things. Yeah, Xhaka is not the most mobile, and 21-year-old Lokonga playing really at the first time at this level. And you're right, that ball was always in, and Mari was being asked to basically deal with Lukaku rather than a midfield shielding. I hate promoting. I hate giving props to Spurs, but against City last week, they stopped them with a back four, but they had a really flat midfield three that made it was difficult to play through. And I agree, we completely lacked that. And Mari gets sucked in, Tierney gets sucked in because Mount's movement is superb. And as you said, the overlap with Reece James.
Yeah, it's as I say, it's a poor goal to concede. When you see it in the stadium, it looks worse when you see it in the stadium. It is.
What else could we have done differently from a back four? You talked about the back three. That would have been ultimately your solution going into a game. But is it just... You said Tierney took a lot of criticism here. Is it on Tierney? Should Saka be dropping back? Yeah. Is it a case of maybe it didn't need to be a 4-2-3-1, but maybe a 4-3-3, so Smith Rowe could have been more of a flat three? How could we have changed this differently? Because the reason I ask is Arteta clearly wants to play the back four. He clearly thinks that's his way going forward. But he's not got the players right. He's got good players. But he's not got the players to be the best in the league and dominate possession against Chelsea or Man City. So what can he do going forward? We've got City on the weekend.
Yeah, look, for me, to give us the best chance to win that game, to give those players the best chance to win the game, it had to be a flat back three. They played very similar to Brentford yesterday. Havertz was playing. I know Havertz and Mount were playing in the half spaces, but Havertz and Lukaku for a lot of the game were a two. If you'd had three centre halves, you would have then had three centre halves against two forwards. So, but if you're going to play a back four, you need, as I say, connections on the right side and the left side. The full-back and the right winger working together as a team, and on the left side the same. Yeah. But if you can ask them to press up high, they're going to be taken out of the game if they play around the press. And that's the problem. So to me, is how he couldn't play. I'm just wondering who he could have played in midfield in a three. Yeah. Only Xhaka and Lokonga, unless he was going to play Arnelli, that would have been too defensive. I just think that what I would have done, you would have played your three centre halves, would have been Chambers, Holding. I wouldn't have played Murray. He had not just because he was poor yesterday, he was poor last week, and I would have played Chambers and Holding in the middle, and I would have played Tierney as a left centre back. Yeah. Right, so that would have been my three. I would have played Saka and Tavares, and I thought Tavares was very bright when he came on yesterday, very physical and bright. They would have been my wing backs. Xhaka and Lokonga in the middle in the four. Then our three players, probably Smith Rowe, probably Pepe and Martinelli as a two, with Smith Rowe behind. Probably played sort of like slightly low block more, and then tried to hit them with pace. But the fact is that Chelsea would have probably gobbled us up anyway with their three centre backs. Yeah. But the only thing is to stay competitive in the game, to stop them from having overloads. That's the only way you could go, I think, to change it up in that way. Or if you're going to play a back four, at least have your wide players working back with your fullbacks to stop the overload. Yeah,
I completely agree. Let's look at that second goal, because you talked about Chelsea going from almost left to right so easily.
Yeah, just one thing I want to say on that first goal actually is Cedric plays them on.
Yes, that's a good point actually. Yeah,
and I think if he'd come out, and I think like Arsenal might have been trying to play the high line even. If he had come out, I think James would have been offside. So that was disappointing from Cedric. But
yeah, really poor.
But the second goal, Cedric gets sucked in. We're going to see it on this right hand side, and I think Havertz does absolutely brilliantly here. Alonso plays it to Havertz. He literally draws Cedric onto him, and Lokonga's over there, and he's able to get round it and put Alonso in down that side. The moment he's done that, Alonso's in space. Our defence there's got stretch, it's got to come across, it's got to work across to the right. There's only three players again, and they're going to create an overload on the side again, and they're going to switch it quite cleverly towards Lukaku. Now Mount is the one who makes this happen really well with a really intelligent pass, spots James's run on the other side, and he's now Tierney again struggling to get across, but once again he's got a problem, and he's in, and that is a very good finish with his right foot. But once again the overload created the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's so interesting about it is we all want to see pressing football and on the front foot, but if it goes wrong, there's kind of big consequences to a high press. And we see Cedric here has gone up to match up with Alonso fine. Lokonga's come across to cover Havertz. I don't really mind that, but if you don't win the ball, that's when they can hurt you. And they're coming through. And what's interesting here is you can see Tierney's already got an iron Mount, and Mary's got an iron Lukaku. I felt Lukaku, and it's actually something I predicted in the warm-up I did with Cecil in Turkish. Everyone kept saying last week, this is before when we thought Ben White would be available, everyone said Lukaku is going to destroy Ben White. And I said, actually, Ben White's quick. Ben White obviously didn't play, but I felt that Lukaku was always going to target Mary, because against Arsenal he's always liked playing more off the right, coming onto his left foot. Yeah, and he played on Mary the whole time, and you can see they're bricking it, because Xhaka's thinking, well, let me just try stop the pass. When it does sort of come into, I'm going to just get it to this position here. When it comes in, Xhaka does actually get across. Tierney's worried about Mount, who's really cleverly dropped off. And everything happens as you said. But Chelsea were just so much smarter than we were in the way they used the space and movement and pulled us apart.
Because they've got a system that they know how to play it. They're well organised. Tuchel sort of like drilled them in this system that they've got very good players, but they're set up so well. I mean, Tuchel was a top manager, when he was at PSG, I think he suffered from the fact that he had a lot of prima donnas in the team, so he couldn't play the way he wanted to play. But this Chelsea team, there's no real prima donnas. They're all great players, and he's moulding a really good side here. And they were just to play Chelsea at the moment, European champions, was going to be difficult with our best 11. I just think it just shows the gap between the two clubs. They are battling for the title. we are battling at the moment to sort of like just try and get on the fringes of European place. I know people can say we're in a relegation scrap. We're not in a relegation scrap, and I'm not saying that lightly. But you can't judge Arsenal at the moment after 2 games, as bad as the start's been. Our worst start for 118 years, 2 defeats, no goals. You know, because he hasn't had the players. You can't judge him when he hasn't had the players. And to play this top side without his best players was, I think, always going to be too difficult and a bridge too far.
Oh, we mentioned the 270 million.
A Stamford Bridge too far.
There you go. There you go. And you're right. We mentioned the 270 million pounds worth of talent.
Yeah.
4 of those 6 signings were Arteta's.
Yeah.
But he got it wrong tactically. Let's touch on are they positives? Not positives, but maybe things that Arsenal fans were trying to get something from.
Yeah.
The penalty incident on Saka.
I think it was, for me, it was a penalty.
Yeah, for me it was as well. Stonewall.
I think it's a give and go. Saka over Lokonga, he works his way into the box. I think James, there's a coming together. Mm-hmm. Now, Chelsea fans will argue that he goes down on contact very easily. But I think as a defender, if you get wrong side of the attacker, he gets the other side of you, and you're going to challenge or you're going to get in there, you've got to win the ball. And he was impeded. So I think the referee makes a poor decision there. That was a penalty. I still don't think it would have changed the game. Chelsea was so dominant. It would have pulled it back to 2-1. I still don't think we would have come back in that game. And I think Chelsea eased off second half and sat deep and tried to just hit us on transition. And the positives for me the second half were, first of all, Lokonga, who I thought was really good, his range of passing. I think the crowd really took to him yesterday, and he was sweeping from side to side. He did a lot of good stuff. And I have to mention Bernd Leno. Now, he made an outstanding save
Yeah, he did.
from Lukaku's header.
Yeah.
Lukaku's performance yesterday, as I said, was the complete centre-forward performance. And he had presence. He had presence in their team, what they've lacked. We've got no presence at the moment in our team. That's the difference between the two sides. An unbelievable header, an unbelievable save from a good header. And then he made another good save from Havertz late on. And also I thought his distribution yesterday and his general play was better than Leno yesterday. Yeah. And then it could be the arrival of Ramsdale as sort of like give him a kick up the arse. Maybe. He's got to start performing.
You're right.
But that were the only positives yesterday in a game that Chelsea totally dominated. And it was men against boys, I have to say.
Chelsea never looked to me like they got out second gear. And actually, if we'd got the penalty and scored it, I feel like they would have just lifted it, got the third, job done. They've got a long season ahead. They're going to compete on all fronts. Yeah. And I think they took their foot off the gas. On the penalty incident, for me, I think people sometimes are trying to be too clever. We love doing our analysis and stuff, right? But I think sometimes you can overthink things. It's a penalty. Saka's running through. James has run into him. They fall on. I actually don't know how there's even a discussion or debate around it. For me, it's a Stonewall penalty. But yeah, ultimately, wouldn't have made much difference. Probably not. We're going to round off with just a quick one on the manager. We can understand, can't we, why people are saying we've seen nearly 2 years of this. It's time to move on. It's not happening. Even with the players missing. It's the lack of threat. It's the lack of anything really going. You felt Chelsea were never troubled. And the example I use is Brighton don't put out an 11 as good as that. And I feel like they would have caused Chelsea more problems because they've got Graham Potter, who's a very good manager. You had a stat on Arteta in terms of his defeats. I'm going to put it up now. But what's your feeling on it all?
Well, that was his 20th defeat and only his 60th 60th game, I think. And Wenger's 20th defeat came in his 116th game. So that just shows you the difference.
Losing half the game.
He's losing a third of the games, isn't he? 20th league defeat and only his 60th game. Yeah. So that's a third loss. Wenger's obviously 116. So that just shows that he's very much a manager learning on the job still. But they have backed him, James. They've backed him in the transfer window. They backed him to the tune of £129 million. They backed him to the tune of 200 million in the last 2 years. So the owners, whatever you think, and the owners are responsible for the fact the club has fallen to where we are. They have not invested in this club for years, James. Yeah. The point I made yesterday was that only, I think, Norwich, Newcastle and Burnley's owners have put less money into their clubs in the Premier League than Arsenal's owners in the last 10 years. But funny enough, since Arteta's come in, they have suddenly started to back him. So the fact he's being backed suggests to me that he's going to get a bit more time. And his record isn't great, but what I'm gonna do with him, I'm gonna wait till he gets his players back. Wait till he gets these key players back we talked about they're missing. He gets the spine of his team back. He gets his two centre halves in place, Gabriel and White, which gives him the chance to play the Highlander football he wants. The two centre mids, Partey next to Xhaka, Partey trying to win the ball higher up, Xhaka controlling it from deep, and then he's going to play this front four. He's going to play, in my opinion, he's going to play Saka on the right. He's going to play Smith Rowe and Odegaard in the half spaces. Odegaard on the right, Smith Rowe on the left, and Aubameyang through the middle. Once he gets these players back, and I think the crucial period for him will be, let's reset the season, because I think we're going to get beat at Man City next week. I just can't see us not getting beat at Man City next week. Reset the season for September the 11th. The next 3 games are Norwich at home, Burnley away, Tottenham. If things are not improved after those 3 games, if we've not got
3 wins,
I think a minimum 2 wins and a draw, a minimum, but 3 wins ideally. But if we're still losing games and not scoring goals, that's a problem. And the problem I got with him is we don't look like scoring goals, and even when he's got the better players in the team, so that's an issue. But I think at the moment the owners are backing him.
You're more patient than I am, because I've got to say,
and you've been a massive defender of Arteta.
I've been incredibly patient with him, and I've seen all the context around his tenure and what's been going on, and I do think that people want to take it away from it. I do think he's had it harder than most, but there is a complete and utter lack of instinct to the way we play. When I'm watching Arsenal and we go a goal down or 2 goals down, I don't feel like we're going to get a goal back. And if you include the Mind Series games, we've now not scored a goal from open play in our last 4. In the Mind Series games, we played against 2 very decently set up Chelsea Spurs sides, and we put out our first 11 and we didn't score. And now these 2 games as well.
But he's got Odegaard now. Odegaard had the highest
True.
That new metric they got, goal expectancy, XT they call it, expected threat.
Yeah.
He was level with De Bruyne in the second half, Kevin De Bruyne, in the second half of last season. He now is the man that he'll be pinning his hopes on, that he's going to change that, James, to give us a more of a creative look to the side and play in our strikers like Aubameyang to score those goals.
And he'll make a difference, but I'm not sure that I'm on board with a manager who, unless he's got absolutely everyone, it's not going to work. You've got to find another way of finding something in this team, because yesterday I still believe a better manager would have caused Chelsea more problems. But I completely agree that the context of losing all the players we did, and the context around Arteta's tenure has made it difficult. Listen, I'm just sort of now biding my time a little bit and just waiting to see what happens, because I am losing faith. But, you are right that there's context, and there's an interesting run after the international break. Thanks for breaking that down with me, Graham. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, mate. Enjoyed it.
Let's break down a win soon.
It'd be nice to break down a goal.
Wouldn't that? Yeah, right. Wouldn't that be good? Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Tactical Insight Show. Remember to like this video. Graham's always in the comment section chatting to you guys, so make sure you engage with Graham as well. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, follow us on AFTV. Loads of content and the fallout from this Chelsea game coming out throughout today and the rest of the week. And we look ahead to Man City. I believe I'm going up to the Etihad, so that's going to be an interesting journey. Wish me luck. Anyway, thanks for joining. We'll see you next week.